Hello everyone, welcome to the Bendigo Art Gallery. Good evening and to our special panel event tonight, Fashion Revolution, presented as part of our Mary Quant event series. My name is Susie Luke, Head of Public Programs and Learning at Bendigo Gallery, and I'll be your MC this evening. Before I introduce our wonderful speakers, I would like to acknowledge that the Bendigo Art Gallery is on Dja Dja Wurrung country. I would like to acknowledge and extend my appreciation for the Dja Dja Wurrung people, the traditional owners of the land that we are all on this evening. And I pay my deepest respects to all First Nations people here tonight and that may be viewing. I would like to acknowledge the support of the City of Greater Bendigo, the Bendigo Art Gallery Board, our education partner La Trobe University, exhibition sponsors Mercure Hotels, Balgownie Estate, Four Pillars Gin, and of course our wonderful Bendigo Venues and Events. Mary Quant was known to the fashion world and business world as a trailblazer. He paved the way for a new, inclusive and optimistic generation of women in Britain and Australia, as other areas in the world, in the post-war 60s. Decades later, we are fortunate to have these three trailblazing women here tonight to give us an insight into contemporary landscape of fashion and feminism. I will now introduce our panellists. Clementine Ford is a Melbourne-based writer, speaker and feminist thinker. She is the author of two books, Fight Like a Girl and Boys Will Be Boys, and has been a columnist for the Fairfax Daily Life and a regular contributor to The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Clementine Ford's writing explores issues of gender inequality and pop culture. Her work has radically changed the issues of men's violence against women, rape culture, and gender warfare in Australia. People, there's seats up the front too. And welcome. Carly Findlay, OAM, is an award-winning writer, speaker, and appearance activist. She also works part-time as Access and Inclusion Coordinator at Melbourne Fringe. Her first book, a memoir called Say Hello, was released in Australia in January 2019. Carly is the editor of anthology Growing Up Disabled in Australia, which came out in February 2021. Carly writes regularly, appears on disability and appearance diversity issues for new outlets including the CNN, ABC, The Age, and the Sydney Morning Herald, as well as SBS. Carly has been named as one of Australia's most influential women by Australian Financial Review and Westpac 100 Women of Influence Awards. Finally, Emma Bazowski-Cox is our Bendigo Art Gallery curator. She became a curator here in 2017 and is also a writer with specialisation in Australian art, exhibitions, collections and museums. Emma has worked in the Australian art museum sector since 2003 across curatorial and programming roles, including the Castlemaine Art Museum, Deakin University Art Collection and the National Gallery of Victoria. Emma has curated numerous exhibitions, including the current international blockbuster exhibition from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, Mary Quant, Fashion Revolutionary, as coordinating curator. She's also done Daughters of the Sun, Christian Waller and Clydie Pate, also at Bendigo Art Gallery, Bill Henson, Landscapes at Castlemaine Art Museum, and I Heart Rock. Rock is the total work of art at Arts Project Australia. Please make them all feel very welcome. We will have time for questions at the end of the discussion. Now over to you, Clem.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you also to the Bendigo Art Gallery for not only hosting this incredible exhibition, but also for inviting us to speak about it tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Dja Dja Djawurrung people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I feel I'm normally quite confident speaking on panels, particularly if they're about feminism, but I'm just going to be straight up here. I think we should all be honest about our fears. I feel quite intimidated by this because, as I said to Emily when I arrived tonight, I don't really know that much about Mary Quant beyond what history and pop culture has kind of fed to me. And I'd be interested in exploring why that is, why as a young woman there's not like a well-known legacy of Mary Quant in the same way that there is perhaps men who have dominated in fashion. That's a question I would like to ask. But before I do that, just surveying the audience here, I want to know who was there when Mary Quant was changing fashion. Well, yeah, let's give you all a big round of applause. And just as a heads up, just to kind of pre-warn you, during the Q&A session, I would love to hear from some of you about what it feels like to look at this exhibition and be taken back to the heyday of the 60s and the 70s when Mary Quant was challenging a lot of society's expectations about women. And on that note, Emily, why don't you tell us about that?
Well, she certainly was a trailblazing designer, and when she started out in 1955, there was really no other female single designers doing what Quant was doing there. She listened to nobody about, not doing what she wanted to do. She was always driven to become a fashion designer, and she didn't come from an aristocratic background. Her parents were school teachers and actively discouraged her from her interest in fashion. But she was determined, and when she went through art school in London in the 50s, she met the right kind of people and gravitated towards the King's Road in Chelsea in 1955, a very bohemian sort of scene there. And I guess London at that time was just opening up. This is post-war, and, to young people of the time, there was possibilities suddenly, and more women going into the workforce and business and better educational opportunities. So she was 25 when she opened her first boutique with a couple of business partners, and being that person herself and just seeing what she wanted fashion to be and offer, that's what drove her. So it's sort of a long response to that question. But, she very quickly saw the success of her boutique and saw that, this offered a very different sort of retail experience to anything that had gone before. If you think of, the couturiers in Paris at that time, or the, big posh sort of department stores like Harrods in London. And here was this boutique that would be open late at night, and they would have parties and outrageous window displays and these very modern, streamlined clothes at much more affordable prices. And it was very successful immediately. And so, being this very energetic, very driven young person, who embodied that sort of attitude and that look herself, very quickly expanded her business through the UK. And after visiting the New York fashion district in the early 1960s, became electrified by this idea of mass production and saw how that could be done, and then took her designs to the world. So she was determined and just in the right place at the right time with the right talents.
One of the things that Emily was kind enough to walk us through the exhibition. We got a personal tour before, so we feel very lucky, don't we? One of the dresses that you showed us was the Bank of England dress, which she made in 1973, 2 years before women were allowed to have their own bank account at the Bank of England. Can you talk a little bit about how she deliberately she deliberately challenged social mores, but also played with it in a really fun way?
She did. So you're right about that. The Bank of England dress, which is one of the garments you'll see in the exhibition, was sort of a response, I guess, to this idea that she herself, even as a woman in business, couldn't open her own bank account or needed a male co-signatory. But to Quant, she had this great sort of sense of fun. So she would play with ideas of, traditions and, particularly British traditions. So using, say, men's suiting fabrics or perhaps military kind of uniforms, she would transform those into garments for young women and have fun with that idea. So you see, things that had never been seen in fashion before with a shirt and a tie and a mini dress in terms of a suit. So it was very deliberate in playing with those sorts of ideas and just, she said herself quite recently in 2012, and as we were saying before, Quant is very much still with us today. She's 91 years old. She said, I didn't have time to wait for women's lib, so she just went ahead and did what she wanted to do.
What was the public response to that? Because I can imagine that there were a few people who were very resistant to a young woman challenging society in that way.
Well, I think
particularly with shortening hemlines.
Shortening hemlines, exactly. Well, and that was something that sort of started emerging in the late 1950s and, part of the music scene and these television dance shows that you would see on the BBC. And early as 1958, I think it was, there was a BBC director who complained about all the girls with these very abbreviated skirts. And so for Quant, she wanted fashion to be functional and enabling. And so to her, that was about freedom of movement, And if you think about what went before that as well, the 1950s sort of silhouette, we have these very controlled sort of silhouette, very pinched in waist and long skirts, and even the hair was sort of coiffed and hairsprayed. Quant was the antithesis of that. So the hemlines came up and the hair, was cut short and moved freely. So being a working woman herself, she wanted her clothes to take women from, the day in the office or the workplace, and then they could, run off for the bus and, wear the dress out to the nightclub as well at night. So, she was part of this whole milieu and this whole social change, this moment where all kinds of things were freeing up for women.
Carly, you're known as being someone who, aside from your work as an activist, I think that the other thing that you're most well known for is your love of fashion and your love particularly of really colourful, vibrant fashion. You also embrace functional fashion too, and you talk about the need for accessibility in fashion. There's a lot of parallels between the way you and Mary Quant looked at what fashion should be for women.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we walked through, and I've stopped wearing things that are uncomfortable. I carry a nana rug around with me all the time now because I just don't want to be cold. I don't generally wear heeled shoes anymore. And I wear all natural fibres close to my skin because those are the things that are accessible for me. And I think that's really important. And when we were going through some of her quotable lines on the wall, she said a lot about fashion needs to be accessible and for everybody. And that's really important to me and to many other women.
One of the things that I love about Mary Quant is that she provided she did the collaboration with Butterick. So she had a real, I'm an expert on Mary Quant now, obviously. I'm just aware of how that sounded. One of the things I loved about this, I don't want it to seem like I don't know anything about Mary Quant, but obviously the story that I grew up knowing most about was Mary Quant shocking people at the tennis with a miniskirt. It's interesting as well that that's the story that has kind of carried the most legacy in terms of that kind of subtle silencing of women's achievements and the way women really changed their sphere in the world. But I was fascinated to learn about the collaboration with Butterick because that shows a real acknowledgement of how inaccessible financially fashion is for a lot of women, and also sizing-wise, because when you look through the exhibition, all of the pieces on display are... There would be few people in this room who could wear any of those dresses, unfortunately, because they're all so beautiful. But acknowledging that that it should still be accessible to working women or to poor women or to working class women or to women who, might have lots of children to buy fashion for or to buy clothes for. That's not something that you see every day.
It was this, great sort of gesture, I guess, for accessibility. That was 1964 when she collaborated with Butterick to offer her designs, through this company so people could make those designs at home. So that had the reach. It was a genius kind of idea as well in terms of marketing, which she was very, very clever at. And suddenly millions more women around the world could access her fashion in that way. And it was, by then she had also moved into sort of mass manufacturing and was selling in department stores and things like that. I mean, early on, her garments in her original boutique called Bazaar in London, I mean, they were more affordable than, say if you went to Harrods or certainly, to a couturier, but still, garments might be around $250 or $300, so that's not especially accessible. So she was absolutely, determined that fashion, the whole point of it was, fashionable clothes for everyone.
Carly, you talk a lot about accessibility in fashion, and not just in terms of, accessibility in terms of everyone should be able to wear beautifully styled clothes. And I feel like there is really something in that, the acknowledgement that making it accessible to everyone doesn't devalue the clothes, it just makes more people love them. But there's such an element of classism and elitism and obviously ableism and fat phobia that exists in the fashion world even today, that we're still a lot of people are still challenging and being met constantly with resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the idea that you can give someone the resources to make their own clothes through, the Butterick patterns, I can't think of any label that does that now at all. It's amazing that that exists, because there are people who are not able to get in the door at a store, or unable to shop online or know what the photos look like online because online accessibility is really poor, or unable to afford or unable to fit into things. And so that is incredible that she did that. And I think we need to see more outlets doing that and bringing it to the masses, and not seeing it as a copyright issue, but a accessibility provision. I think that's a great idea.
Or as an hostility issue either. The idea that somehow that there are certainly large swathes of fashion designers and brands and high street labels even that only want a particular kind of person wearing their clothes, and that's what we're really struggling to challenge in the world is all of those intersecting aspects of discrimination.
Absolutely. I mean, even with social media being quite democratized, we still see brands only using a certain type of woman. I feel very lucky that brands like Obus, which is this dress, I bought this dress by the way, but they've given me things and they've asked me to write for them and feature on their social media, because they don't want to show a certain type of women. They want to show that all types of women and non-binary people and men, I guess, if they choose, wear their clothes. And that's really important to me, to buy things and support brands that support diversity and are authentic in that.
There is, you mentioned before, Emily, about Mary Quant discovering the capacity of mass production. And I feel like that's become such a huge issue, because mass production now means fast fashion, which means exploitation of garment workers first and foremost. It also means climate devastation. And yet, ironically, it also makes a lot of clothes accessible to people by way of them being cheap and by way of them being, size inclusive. Whereas a lot of sustainable fashion designers don't make size inclusive clothes, and their clothes are often inaccessible for people financially. What is the solution? Solve fast fashion for me right now.
I wish I could, up here in my Zara jeans with my Alpha 60 jacket.
I'm balancing you out because I got this dress from Savers.
I think we've got it covered then between Obus and Savers. And look, it's really tough, and it's sort of come full circle, isn't it? And what those ideas, that's a very modernist idea to sort of, the expansion and, mass production, all these things were new at the time, so therefore better. And now we're at this time where we need to consider the environment. This is a crisis, and, then there's the ethical issues around fashion production and almost for the way what we value, I think, in contemporary fashion design. I'm not a fashion curator per se, is those sorts of ideas of sustainability and, maybe privileging First Nations fashion design, for example, and we recently presented our Pimpy exhibition, which some people came to visit, and it's now toured on to the National Museum in Canberra, curated by my fabulous former colleague, Shanae Hobson. And that was almost entirely all Indigenous First Nations designers. It's the first exhibition of its kind in this country of, designs by Aboriginal women. So that, exhibition has other implications in terms of sort of, development for Indigenous talents and those sorts of things. So, yeah, I think the things that we do value now in fashion are quite different to what Quant was trying to do in a different sort of way.
Let's just move back briefly to the exhibition itself. Obviously, as you walk through the exhibition, who has seen it or is yet to see it? Oh, no, sorry, who's seen it? And who has yet to see it? Okay, great. All right, I know what I'm working with now. So those who have seen it will know that you walk through different eras of Quant's oeuvre. That's a French word that I learned recently. And those who haven't seen it yet will see, as I did, that the exhibition itself is an art piece, and it's not just the curation of it, but the way that it's been styled is so beautiful. What's, your personal preference, what's your favourite part of the Quant era?
Yeah, it's look, I think it's pretty hard to go past that sort of mid-1960s period and the wool stretch jersey that she used, and then in her mini dress sort of designs became her signature sort of look. And I love that she used a material that had been traditionally used in football uniforms, so traditionally male fabric, and in these incredible colours. And so, and she did that particular design in all sorts of permutations, and that was just a peak sort of period for her. But then following that, into the late 60s and 70s, she gets into the maxi dresses and this kind of thing, which is, extending that, possibility for other kinds of bodies, I suppose, and what they're comfortable with. So it is hard to pinpoint any one particular garment, because what she did was actually quite diverse too.
How about you, Carly?
There was a really great tartan dress that Emily pointed out to me. I really like that. A lot of it is very Q-esque, Q, the Australian label. I really liked a lot of that. And I'm not sure what era that was. Was it the 60s?
The tartan dress is 1967, and you're right, it's got this sort of slightly Victoriana kind of ruffled collar, but it's this sort of glittery tartan material, and we were lucky enough to be able to put it on open display so you can get up nice and close and have a good look at it. It's gorgeous.
What's your favourite?
I think personally the ones that I would wear would be the jersey mini dresses with the sort of the higher neck, a little flash of leg. I really liked those. But to look at, I loved, there's some really kind of cheeky pieces in there. Firstly the scoop necks coming, obviously to sort of expose, obviously it would be shirted, I know that, but an exposure of the bosom in a way that previously had not been done. And then there's one piece in there which is very kind of BDSM-like, which is there's a sort of it's almost like a Hessian sack material collar with a sort of belt coming down in between the breasts. And I thought that was really, for the time, would have been considered quite controversial. So can we talk a little bit about maybe the backlash that Mary Quant would have probably loved getting, but whether or not, was there much backlash? Was she considered scandalous?
Well, I think that she is commonly thought of as the inventor of the miniskirt, for example, but she said, no, that was the girls on the high street who would come into her store and ask for the hemlines to be shorter. So, look, I think, she really should be looked at as part of this entire kind of era and this youth movement that was happening in the 60s. And, of course there was backlash and, but I think it was almost this unstoppable kind of force. She was a very, very successful designer right from the beginning. And 1966 and we opened the exhibition with this garment that she wore, a mini dress that she wore, receiving her Order of the British Empire from the Queen. She's wearing a mini skirt, and so this was only 11 years after she'd gone into business. So I think there was a real recognition, because she was so successful in business, that if there was a backlash, it was that was for the dinosaurs to have.
And Princess Margaret would have definitely skirts.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting point, though, that she acknowledged that the designs were being influenced by young women coming in off the street. And I think that so often that influence that young women and oftentimes working class women, particularly women of colour, have on the zeitgeist is not ever really kind of given tribute to. In terms of language as well, the way that speech is influenced by particularly teenage girls of colour and then valley girls, all of the things that girls and women end up being ridiculed for are the things that most strongly influence pop culture. And obviously we're talking about the 60s as well at the time. I've always found it really interesting that the Beatles is considered one of the greatest bands of all time, but started as a boy band. And teenage girls created the Beatles, and it was only when the Beatles became considered like superior or legitimate rock that then they could be accepted as being a decent band. I'm interested in that discrediting of women and their contributions to culture, even though they're so often at the forefront of shaping it.
Well, that's right. And there's this, very uncomfortable sort of relationship between, I guess, body confidence and, beauty kind of ideals and things like that for people to sort of participate in the fashion and beauty industries. So you talk about that beautifully in your book, Fight Like a Girl, Clementine. And so, yes, it's an interesting topic, I guess, fashion and feminism, because in one way it can be almost a love-hate kind of relationship for women. And I also like in your book where you talk about a suggested alternative set for how we, size clothing.
We didn't pre-organise this, by the way.
No, we're just riffing now. But, it's... as I said, I'm not a fashion curator, but I think that for women it can be a real love-hate sort of thing, and certainly, I wouldn't like to wear a mini dress myself, but, yeah.
You say you're not a fashion curator, but in curating this show, was there anything that really surprised you? Anything that you discovered that you didn't expect to discover? Anything that moved you?
Well, the way we put the show together, where it comes as to us from the Victorian Albert Museum in London, and so it comes as a sort of a package, I guess. I was really moved, I guess, by the Quant story and how driven she was as a young person, and didn't particularly come from a privileged background and things like that. But she just pushed aside anybody who told her she couldn't do that, and the way she just was so driven to achieve what she did in business, and to manufacturers, for example, who would say to her, and she's a very quietly spoken sort of person as well, for what she achieved. She'd go to a manufacturer and say, I really want to develop these sort of plastic shoes or something like that, and they would say, you can't do that, and she would just say to them, I just know you'll find a way. So I guess to me that's inspiring, and to just break ground in the way that she did, and to recognise, the power of branding and things like that. So the Daisy logo that, is so famous now, this was one of the very first designer logos, and she, just had that innate kind of sense that this was going to work.
I love that. I know you'll find a way. Carly, you do often post on Instagram and on Twitter. You'll post an outfit of the day, and you'll say, "I wore this today, and I felt fucking fabulous." I know that you do that partly because you find joy in fashion and self-expression, but also as an act of political resistance. Would you mind expanding a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I post on Twitter, particularly because of the brevity of Twitter only allows 248 characters, I think. And so I do that. But I also do it because it is not expected for someone like me to feel fucking fabulous. When people with facial differences, skin conditions, disabled people are constantly told that we shouldn't be seen, that it's so great that someone like me is getting out, or, you know, the need to change our appearance in some way. And so by doing that, it is an act of defiance. It's a political act for me and for others. And I love it when I get tagged on Twitter and people say, you know, they wore this and they felt fucking fabulous as well, because it just, you know, it's for everyone, and it's not about how you look, but it's about how you feel. And I think fashion as we know it is over. People wear exactly what they feel like wearing, and that is really true. You know, I feel like I've given myself permission not to hide anymore. When I was younger, I was just saying to Emily before, I bought this amazing mini dress and a swing coat, and it was glitter pink. And I was too afraid of wearing it because I never wanted to stand out more than I already did, like in my 20s. And so it hung in my cupboard for a very long time, and I gave it to my best friend Camille, who I do believe wore it. I'm not sure where it is now. Camille passed away in 2019, but as I was walking along, I thought about that wall, and she would have loved those colours because she just loved pink and orange together. Yeah, and I sort of, probably when I got to in my 30s, I thought, you know, I'm not going to hide away anymore. I am going to wear the bright colours. I'm not going to fade into the background anymore. And so it's been liberating. It's been really great to wear what I want when I want and how. And I think also I used to work for the government in quite a conservative department, and there wasn't a dress code, but it was expected that you would dress, you know, in a suit in grey or black. And since I've worked in the arts, don't do that. Although I did wear black jeans to work one day and to Melbourne Fringe, and they did ask me if I'm okay because I wore black. And I wanted a black shirt the other day, and I had to ask people, where do I go to get this particular black item, because I just don't wear any kind of neutral, muted tones.
I don't think I've ever seen you in anything neutral.
Glitter is my neutral, or florals.
It's true, though, that sort of sense of one of the things that I really love about going through all of the different eras of her work is that consistent playfulness, and even in the designs that are kind of quite formal, there's like a cheeky wink in all of them. And it's interesting, Carly, what you say about working in government. You know, you're expected to wear black or grey or, you know, dark, neutral tones. And that's always been associated, that kind of dress has always been associated with seriousness and being smart. And it's something that so often, it certainly does discriminate against men as well if they would like to have more flair in their dressing.
They can wear coloured socks.
They can wear coloured socks or coloured ties or whatever, but I think it's often used more against women, that if women dress in loud, vibrant colours, or if they dress in what's perceived to be kind of ostentatious clothes, then they can't possibly be taken seriously. And I like how she plays with those ideas of what is a serious person.
Actually, that reminds me of that Caitlin Moran quote that you have in your book, Clem, something along the lines of, when a woman says she doesn't know what to wear today, what she's really saying is, I've got nothing to wear for who I'm supposed to be today. Something along those lines. We can all sort of relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that for me personally, obviously for extremely different reasons, Carly, but still having some sense of that insecurity in my 20s, that lack of knowledge of who you are, it's incredible to me that she opened her first boutique at 25, because to me my 20s were just characterised by having absolutely no idea who I was as a person, what my style was, who I was, what kind of woman I was supposed to be on any given day, let alone that day. And now at 39, it's really been only in the past couple of years that I've kind of felt more confident to play. Like, as you get older, you feel more confident in playing with looks, which I think is part of that resistance or overturning of everything that we've been told is acceptable as a woman, and everything that we've been told we must do in order to be taken seriously.
I have a group of friends who you might have seen on my Instagram, who we all really like to dress colourfully, and I feel like when we meet, we I wouldn't say we compete, but it's, we really play up who can be the most not outrageous, outlandish, most colourful, wearing the rainbow. And I was just also thinking before, Clem, when you were talking about men, my husband is a tradesman, I guess, and he wears a lot of khaki and high vis to work. And in the last, 3 or 4 years, he's become really interested in fashion, and we went to this place in Melbourne called Anton's, which sells very lavish suits, and he has got a very big array now of different, competing with me in terms of colour in his suits. And we went to a wedding a couple of years ago, and I ran into the supermarket and he was waiting outside, and I got out and he said, 2 people complimented me on my outfit. He had this really great ice blue velvet jacket with red pants and red shoes. And he said, I didn't know what to say because I've never received a compliment on my outfit before. It was really cute. And he actually went to a wedding recently without me, and that was fine. But I said, no, it was fine. I wanted to just stay home and watch Netflix. But he said to me, he's preparing, and it's been a long time since we've gone out anywhere to have to wear a suit. And he said, do you think I might be the best dressed there? And I said, I think you should reserve that place for the bride and groom. So his level of confidence has just increased since he's found these suits.
And that's sort of a great nod to the part in the exhibition as well, where, all of Mary Quant's makeup is spread out, and she has a section there that, as you noted, it was called, was it a colouring box for men?
Yeah, colouring box for men.
Colouring box for men, for the glam rock era, So, and I think the ad said something like, why not smudge a little bit of black around your eyes? And it is funny that we're still at this point. I mean, obviously, social media has democratised how fashion can be expressed, and we have much more beautiful and inclusive understanding of gender and all of its different expressions now, and a lot more people are feeling confident to express themselves through fashion and through colour. But we still are lagging in terms of that patriarchal oppression of a particular kind of cis masculinity. This assumption that if you're a cis straight man in particular, that you must dress in particular ways in order to be, well, partly to maintain safety for yourself, I'd say, but also to maintain your accepted position in the patriarchal hierarchy. And we're not quite there yet. Do you see us getting to a point where fashion becomes as fun for all people, even men like Adam? I mean, he's there.
Yeah, that's right. And my boyfriend has a fantastic sartorial sense too, Bradley, in the audience. I certainly hope so. And, that's one way I think women are really, winning in that, fashion's about expression and expressing identity, in that idea of doing that with some freedom. So it sounds like an opportunity for designers to really, show that for men, isn't it?
I feel like I see it again much more in the arts than in the government. It's my male colleagues wear nail polish and what's considered feminine outfits much more, if ever, than I've ever seen when I worked for the tax office.
Yeah, my son he's almost 5, and he loves putting on his nail polish with me, and he's got his own eye makeup palette that he likes to put his makeup on alongside me sometimes, but he just thinks that the eyeshadow goes on his eyebrows. And he likes to do one different colour, so red and blue, and heads off to Kinder like that. And I was like, that's what he wants to wear today. We've got about 15 minutes left for questions now. If you do have a question, just put your hand in the air and we'll get a microphone to you. As I said, I would love to hear from anyone who was there when it happened and what, looking at the exhibition, made you feel. Did it deliver you back? Did it make you feel nostalgic?
Can I just say, if you want to ask a question, if you could raise your arm, and our beautiful education officer Margot will come, and she's going to hold the microphone for you because of COVID, and you just speak nice and loudly in here for our hearing impaired people. Thank you.
For accessibility reasons, we asked for the mic.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, thanks, Carly. So I was wanting to ask about the colourful clothing, but specifically, Carly, I saw you mention something on Facebook last week about, now I can't get the hormone right, it's endorphin or one of the ones where it makes you happy.
Dopamine.
Yeah, the dopamine thing. So I read that and really connected with it because recently I'm really going overboard on really childish clothing because the work that I do is really, really depressing. I research childhood death and it's really depressing. And I've noticed in the last 3 years, the more I get into that, the more ridiculous and childish my clothing is becoming. And so I'm thinking, in that sort of idea of identity and expressing feeling fucking fabulous, where that sort of goes in terms of dealing with mental health and, yeah, I don't know what I was going with that. Hey,
Yeah.
cool.
I know
makes
that
sense.
there's a study being done around dopamine dressing, and it's a psychological study that says that when you dress a certain way, you feel happier. I think there's probably a Mary Quant quote around the gallery that says similar, that when you dress a certain way, your body releases certain endorphins and you feel good, you feel happy. I certainly do. When I'm scrolling through Instagram and I feel like I get the same reaction from a really great outfit as I do when I hear a song. You just resonate with that. And the same with like thinking about putting together clothes, and my clothing doesn't take much planning. I put on whatever is on my wardrobe situation. And so, yeah, I just pull it together like that. But I do know people that really, put in a great deal of effort, and it does make you feel good. It gives you that rush. And then when you get the compliments, and not that I do it for compliments, but I do think that the amount of "are you sunburnt" has decreased quite significantly to "I love your outfit" comments. So that's been great.
I think it's really interesting and obviously deeply rooted in sexism that as women in particular age, they're expected to dress, not just seriously, I know we talked about that before, but invisibly. And, the whole sort of like, well, women of a certain age shouldn't have long hair because long hair is for maidens. And the desexualization of women as they age and the enforced expectation that you basically be complicit in your invisibility, I think is something that a lot of people are challenging now, and that social media has a lot of problems, obviously, but social media has the opportunity to not just democratise that space and that kind of resistance, but also to celebrate it. And I feel like similarly to you, not just that my work is often extremely depressing and challenging, but also that it's kind of a way of disarming people. I love nothing more, if I'm speaking on a feminist panel in particular, than to dress up in a very hyper-feminine way, bows and puffy sleeves. And also I think that it challenges our own internalised misogyny about what it means to be a woman who is a strident person and who has a strong political viewpoint on feminism and dress in a way that has been sort of perceived to be, well, if you like pink and if you like sparkles, then that makes you a bit of a silly Billy.
I mean, I was telling Clem on the drive up here, that I've had disabled women say that I shouldn't be dressing like I do or buying the clothes I do because it then prevents other disabled women who can't afford these clothes from relating. And I guess that is wrapped up in lateral violence and also internalised misogyny on their part. But you're right, and it disarms people when it's, again, not expected for me to dress like this or to be able to afford it. And I absolutely recognise my privilege in that way, but it's disappointing that that's being said.
Another question. I think that there was one just here, and then we'll go there, and then we'll go that way.
First of all, what a wonderful inspirational panel, and I'm sure Quant would be absolutely thrilled to hear you speaking. Secondly, I was brought up in Britain in the 50s and 60s. It was my era. It was the best time to be there.
Just got chills.
The pop bands and Mary Quant, and that it was a holistic thing. It all came together. There were female pop singers such as Lulu who used to wear Quant's clothes, and that was amazing. And it was just a wonderful time, wonderful way to annoy your parents, going out and buying those clothes. Going around the exhibition, it was a walk down memory lane. Two things interested me. One was that quite a lot of the initial ones were quite heavy, like the tweedy pinafores and things like that, which is probably far too hot for Australia, but was okay for Britain. And secondly, I didn't notice much blue. Was that because that was a conservative colour, or was it because Quant didn't like wearing it? There were very few blue outfits.
Emily?
Yeah, that's a good point. There is that very early dress, I think from 1958, a party dress in the first little section there. And you're right, as she sort of goes through, I guess when she's sort of looking at traditional British traditions in terms of fabrics and things like that, she's looking at the greys and the browns and these sort of palettes, and if she's using men's suiting fabric, I mean the Bank of England dress is a dark navy, and then later as she moves into sort of mass production, she has this palette which, colours like prune and ginger and putty, very English, were, in vogue, and then she moves into, what's available, I suppose, in the wool stretch jerseys, and they have very bright greens and things like that. I guess it was probably what was in vogue more broadly at the time as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that reflection. That was wonderful, particularly the part about annoying your parents. And we've got a question over here. Some fabulous pink hair there, I think I can see. An ombre pink. I love it.
Firstly, I would actually like to thank you both for being very visibly playful with fashion, because it kind of leads to my question, which is that as someone who moves in fairly leftist circles and likes to rock a dress and some makeup and all of that sort of thing, I've struggled with not being taken seriously in even those circles, and I want to talk
misogyny on the left.
I know, but it's that thing of a woman can never do the right thing, right? She's got to be a certain way no matter which circle she sort of rolls in. And again, like you guys mentioned, it is something where it hurts men too, because they don't get to experience that full breadth of fun, and the fact that fashion is considered frivolous, whereas men's pursuits are maybe taken a little bit more seriously. It's how do we get from where we are? Because, we was trying to deal with that in the 60s and 70s. How do we get from that to the next step? Where are we going? How are we getting there?
Such a true statement, honestly. And I during lockdown last year, I started really using my Instagram page to play with fashion. What else were we going to do, And I think that there was an expectation from some people who'd been following my work for a long time that I should be sitting inside my house in a depressing time for everyone, and making myself even more depressed and anxious and angry by just being swamped in terrible stories and just doing the work that they'd kind of associated with me. Whereas I was well, I'm sitting in my house like everyone else. I'm going to play with fashion. I'm going to learn how to do makeup, because I've always really loved makeup. I did probably in my 20s go through that kind of internalized misogyny resistance to it partly because I didn't feel like I knew how to do it well, so I was like, well, it's stupid. Sorry, I shouldn't have said stupid. Well, it's ridiculous. And also partly because of the sense of like, well, no one will take you seriously if you care about these things, and getting older and becoming more confident about being able to say, well, fuck off, that's ridiculous. I do notice with my son that particularly on the left and with kind of like leftist ideas of, or small L liberal ideas of raising children, that everyone's very keen for little boys to play with dolls and to, you know, play with colour and to wear pink and sparkles, but really still scathing of it if little girls like doing those things. You know, I grew up to be someone who the Daily Mail regularly writes articles about calling hardline feminist and man-hater. And I loved pink when I was a kid. It's still my favourite colour. I grew up loving Barbie dolls, loving makeup, all of the stuff that we're told, you know, makes girls silly and it kind of makes us not serious, when actually the problem is that anything girls like is just diminished and made out to be ridiculous. You know, anything girls do is diminished. So I feel like resisting that and saying that it's you placing your expectations on me as to how you think I should behave in order to be taken seriously. Isn't it interesting that the things that you find make me unserious are all the things that have traditionally been associated with femininity? Maybe you should reflect on that and just sort of twist it back to them. And I think that if we continue to challenge those things and make space as well, I mean, women are always expected to do the emotional work for men, but invest, I suppose, I suppose that work is work that I think is important doing. Invest in making it more possible for men to find enjoyment in those things, or to recognise that those things are enjoyable.
I also think there's a really big issue that women of colour who wear their hair naturally, who wear our hair curly, I am one of those, that aren't taken seriously in so-called professional environments. And also there is an expectation that people will wear makeup to work. And if they don't wear makeup, therefore they can't do their job, or they can't be in a customer service presenting role. And for someone that can't wear makeup or chooses not to because it would irritate me quite a lot, you know, that immediately puts me at a disadvantage, or, well, firstly, to have a facial difference. But, you know, we need to also challenge that we should be able to wear our natural hair and natural faces and not be judged and not think, oh my God, the world's going to end today because I'm not wearing makeup when I go out the house, you know, because you're perfectly competent at doing your job without makeup on or with your hair curly.
Yeah. There was a question in the back corner there.
Sorry.
Hey, so my question I think relates to how women of a certain age, so I'm 36 or so, and grew up with a mum who was a second wave feminist, and I think really did push me away from doing feminine or traditionally feminine things like hair and makeup and things like that, because it was seen as not part of feminism as a movement. I know who Mary Quant is because I love fashion, but I feel like she's probably not as well known by the rest of the world because she was dismissed as being playful or and do you think that there was any sort of disconnect between the feminist movement and things like what she was doing, because it wasn't as serious as you know, short hair and button-up flannel shirts and things like that I would typically associate with second wave feminists. Does that make sense? I hope I've made sense in my question. And also just about the dopamine dressing too. Sometimes when I'm in a terrible mood, I dress like I'm in a terrible mood. So it doesn't always have to be rainbows. And if you're having a bad day, you can wear black lipstick and you know, everything black and feel really sad in it as well. So I think there's that expression of fashion as well.
Emily?
I think maybe, Clem, you could speak better to this, but I think describing is that catch-22, women can't win sort of thing. And props to you, by the way, for that fabulous jacket that you're wearing, and I'm glad you have embraced your sartorial spirit. Look, that's right, and we've still got a long way to go, haven't we? And, I think about people like my sister-in-law who, years ago when she was working in a really hardcore sort of corporate environment in London, and she dresses like these pinks and these greens and everything, and her nickname amongst the men in the office there was Rainbow, and but she just persisted, and she just, I think visibility is a part of it. I know you speak beautifully about that, Carly, in your book, and representation matters, so it's about being seen, and you touched on this as well. The more you can see people doing things and being things, the more accepted it just becomes. I also think of Vivienne Westwood, and when we were talking about age before, I think everybody here should just go and follow Vivienne on Instagram right now. And she's just turned 80 and gets up on her soapbox, and she's wearing corsets, and, she's got the long hair, and, these sorts of representations, and very public ones, are so important.
I think that's such a great question and link that you've made. It's not one I have personal experience of, because my mum wasn't a second wave feminist. She wasn't a traditional kind of quote unquote homemaker either. I mean, she was a separate category altogether. She was from, she had a pretty disadvantaged background. She was forced to leave school at 13. She was a migrant from South America to London, and she experienced a lot of hostility when she arrived. To a degree, I don't think she had time for feminism. And so she was just kind of really, she became a single mum at 28. She was just out there trying to survive the world. And then when she had me, I was her third kid, and circumstances in her life had changed by then, because she'd met my dad and married and had a more stable life. I think that, she was a voracious reader, and she was kind of politically well-read, but the second wave feminist movement had sort of passed by, and she was busy working. Which is not to say, obviously, I know that a lot of second wave feminists were working class, but it wasn't a part of her life. So I wasn't raised with those expectations of, well, you can't like these things, because if you like these things, then you're somehow being brainwashed by the patriarchy. It's tricky because obviously we can't divorce from patriarchal, we can't divorce feminine expectations of feminine expression from patriarchal oppression. But it's like I said before, pink and makeup and fashion and colours and playing with dolls and all these things, they're not in and of themselves patriarchal. Patriarchy has made them bad and has used them as ways to oppress women, and we can't win either way. If we don't wear makeup to work, then we're not trying hard enough, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're slovenly, we're all of these things, with that and the other. If we do like it too much or do it for ourselves, then we're just silly pawns of the patriarchy, and we have no agency. It all comes down to the fact that women never are allowed to have agency over their own decisions. And some of my favourite TikToks are from young women who, wear the most ostentatious makeup and the most ostentatious clothing. And they say things to the camera like, do you think I'm wearing this for men? In what world do men like this kind of makeup? Because that's another thing as well. We're told, well, men don't like that much makeup. Men don't like women who wear too much makeup. So it's kind of like, I think I even say this in my book that, sorry, I just did a reference to the book, but it's the shifting goalposts of expectation. We are never, the system is not designed to allow us to get a goal. If we do get a goal, then we just got lucky. Because anytime they tell us to kick somewhere, as soon as we take the kick, they pick the goalpost up and they move it somewhere else. But I think that's a really interesting point about that maybe the kind of the lesser known, or why she's not as well known because of the particular time that she was operating in. I mean, I think she was incredibly feminist, but the legacy of resisting patriarchy maybe has silenced or has invisibilized who she was.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more question. Did you want to ask? Yep. Just down the front here, Margot. Yep, no worries.
Hi.
Fabulous outfit, by the way.
Pardon?
I love your outfit.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I wanted to say the exhibition is really amazing, and I've brought in 5 lots of friends to see it because I'm in Bendigo at the moment, and I organised for Jenny Key to come in because, as you know, we're very close.
I know.
And I wished that we were being recorded while we were going through the exhibition.
Can you do it again?
And the other thing, because I was 15 in 1966 and I was already making all my own clothes and clothes for my cousins, and Jenny was 18, she was 3 years older than me. So I'm in Melbourne, very groovy Melbourne, going to Emily Macpherson College of Domestic Economy to study fashion, where you weren't allowed to wear trousers. And I would get into trouble because I wanted to make the latest mod, Mary Quant inspired whatever, and the jacket was like, you know, and I got into trouble for that. But to go through with Jenny, the memories that it brought up from the very beginning, because she was in London having this amazing time, and I'm over here, as you know. So we would stand in front of something and suddenly go, "Oh my God, I had a purple pinafore dress that I wore with a black skivvy, and I had red boots." And she said, "Is that? But I had a purple. I had a red." It was so amazing. The memories that I think what this exhibition has done in Bendigo has been awesome. I just had to tell you.
I'm so excited to see you here, Linda Jackson, one of Australia's most iconic fashion designers here. And I'm just... The tights, yes. I'm loving that about the exhibition, and I have to say, you know, that's a big part of how it was put together through this call out, We Want Quant in London, and 1,000 women or so responded to that and to share their garments and their stories. And that's, you know, it's the stories of the women who owned these garments that has made up this exhibition. And while what they were, you know, so-called cheaper garments or whatever, these were treasured and kept by women for many, many years. And, you know, I love that you can see that in the exhibition. You can even see, I was showing Carly, you know, a little stain down the front of one of the cocktail gowns, and I love to think about the woman that was eating that hors d'oeuvre at that party, and whoops, you know. So the exhibition embodies all of these stories and experiences of women. So thank you, Linda. I'm delighted to see you here again. I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you.
It would be... I don't know if you have this, but if there were a sound booth that people could record their oral testimonies at the end, you know. I think that's all that we've got time for.
I think
it's been such an amazing evening and an incredible discussion. Thank you all so much for coming. And also thank you to the people who offered your personal reflections as well. That's definitely, like, it's made it a much more magical... It was already magical, but it's made it even more magical. Emily, thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your insight and for teaching me about Mary Quant. Carly Findlay, thank you so much for bringing the personal political perspective. And thank you, Susie, for stepping in for Jess tonight.
Thank you to Clementine Ford, Carly Findlay, Emma Bazowski-Cox, and our wonderful Auslan interpreter, Glenda. Can you please give them a big round of applause?
If you haven't seen the exhibition yet, and I know that's about half of you in the room, please do make time to see it. It's really, truly incredible. And I think actually now that you've heard some of these reflections as well, I think will be even more special for you. So that's wonderful. And thank you to the Bendigo Art Gallery. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.